Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin with the name of God. We send salutations on the most noble and the best of creation, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, we begin with the intention that, because actions are known by intentions, and we begin with the intention that this session is a means of us gaining a greater understanding of ourselves. And through that, we gain a greater understanding and a connection and a nearness to God himself. Because it says that he who knows himself knows his Lord, and we were created in this physical dimension, in this physical reality, to excel and to be the very best version of ourselves. And I'm hoping, inshallah, through these empowered you sessions, that we can help. The intention is that these sessions help us and support us on that journey so that we can become the very true conscious beings, living our highest potential as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that God created us to be. Inshallah, I'd like to welcome Sister Hana Paul to today's session. I just want to briefly just mention how I came across Sister Hana. I attended one of her workshops, the Human Frameworks, a few weeks ago. It was a full day session, and alhamdulillah, it was recorded afterwards and accessible to the students afterwards for about a week after. But when I actually saw the timings of the course, I thought there's no way I'll be able to sit for the whole day, because it was a full day course. It was 9 till 5. Although I would have preferred the physical attending the session, but I thought online I'm going to really struggle with it. But alhamdulillah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I truly benefited from it. That I didn't want the session to end, and I was there throughout the whole program. I thought I might have to leave halfway and access the recording afterwards. It was, alhamdulillah, there was so much that was introduced. I've been on a journey myself for the last few years, and I came to a point in my life where I literally wasn't able to function mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It was affecting me, and it was through gaining knowledge that I was able to empower myself to make those small changes, which ultimately those small changes became significant changes in the long run. And there was a point when I was so depressed that I literally couldn't function on any level, and I had to take that time out. And that journey never ends. We're always developing ourselves, and we're always learning something new that inshallah that can benefit us, that can benefit our families, and that can benefit our communities. And so the session, on that journey of development and that evolution, I came across, this landed in my inbox a few weeks ago, the Human Framework session, which I attended with Sister Hana, and it introduced me to concepts that I had heard previously, but then it gave me more insight. And as always, one session is never enough. We need to constantly keep developing ourselves, keep learning, and things like the human temperaments were introduced again a bit more in detail from what I'd studied previously. Our body's innate power for self-healing, and understanding that we have these certain qualities within us, which if they're unbalanced, they can cause so much disharmony within our body and put our body out of balance. And also introducing lifestyle factors that our bodies need in order for them to work optimally, because that is the state that we're supposed to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're his highest, the best creation, his greatest product, and we are meant to be functioning on all levels, whether that be mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, to our optimum. And if something in that dynamic and in that framework is not working according to how it should be working, it's time for us to stop and reflect and make those changes. But those changes can only really happen when we have the right knowledge, because when we come off track, like I know how often have we jumped into something, and because we didn't have the right knowledge behind it, we jumped back out of it just as easily. So for me, it's always about empowering people with knowledge, because knowledge is potential power if we act upon it. And so I'm so grateful that, alhamdulillah, I've managed to get Sister Hana, who is so busy, but I've been able to get her on this call today. Although I know a little bit about Sister Hana, I would like her to, you know, introduce herself more in detail. But what I know a little bit about her is that she's a Unani Tib practitioner. She's a naturopath and a herbalist, and she also is a midwife. I don't know if she's still practicing her midwifery. So she's an extremely talented young lady. She's invested a lot of time, energy, many years of her life, I'm sure, into learning this knowledge. And you know, it's our duty then, therefore, as students, to go and learn this knowledge from somebody who has gone away and done the hard work, so she can bring us the very best. She can give us the shortcuts. She can give us the solutions, because I know for myself, especially when I've been qualifying as a coach, that I've had to invest so much time and energy, so many hours, so much money learning that knowledge. And if you are able to benefit from that for a fraction of the time, or a fraction of the money, you've actually done yourself the greatest favor. So alhamdulillah, I managed to get her on today. Sister Hana, I'd like you to just, briefly tell us for people who don't know what Unani Tib is, or that don't know what a naturopathy is, just give us a little bit of insight into what that is.
Well, sure. So I'll start off by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I wanted to extend a really heartfelt gratitude to everyone who's joined us here today. I wanted to thank you as well, Sayyida, for inviting me. So sending you guys really felicitous greetings, and it's a delight to be here to share with you some of the things that I've been able to learn and also pick up over the sort of few years that I've been learning and practicing this medicine. So Sayyida already mentioned there, I qualified some 20 years ago as a midwife, and I've worked within an NHS framework setting. I worked primarily sort of between the intrapartum area, so worked more so on a delivery suite or a midwifery-led unit. And it's there really my love of sort of holistic things kind of came in. And myself, like I suppose Sayyida mentioned, and a number of other people, no doubt, encountered a number of health conditions. And I developed an autoimmune condition, unfortunately, that led me to becoming quite immobilized, and I was in quite a dire strait, and eventually leading to the point where the GP thought for my mobility and being able to move around that perhaps a wheelchair would have been of best use to me. So you can imagine being some sort of in my early 30s, being given something like this and thinking, hold on a minute, something's not quite right here. Why are we only looking at disease management rather than looking at ways in which we can bring back health and well-being to a person? And in that time, one of the things I recognized as being really important was that many of us lose over the years agency and autonomy in our health and well-being. And part of that is because the culture we're in also kind of promotes us to discharge over and hand over our care and well-being to others. And rightly so, when we do go to a practitioner or to a doctor, we are going there with the intention of giving over and I suppose in some respects surrendering our well-being, our conditions to them so they can help us get better. But I found that in giving that over, I lost so much of myself. And so this is where my journey into sort of Unani Tib medicine and holistic medicine come in, because I stumbled upon by accident a naturopathic practitioner, and in the space of 6 months with a couple of the tools that were given to me, I was not only able to reclaim a state of sort of what we call balance within the body, but well-being came back in, and all different areas of my life began to change, and I was able to kind of get back my life in the way I needed to. That set me on a trajectory then to become a Unani Tib physician, and then also go on to study somatic experiencing, because we understand that psycho-emotional health is also very important in this. And so that's where I'm at really. I've done midwifery, that led me on to Untitled medicine, that led me on to somatic experiencing, and now I'm going to be furthering my studies and looking at how we can look at early years relational trauma and different things like that, and how they impact us later on in our lives. So that's kind of where I've got to. And in the midst of all of that stuff, I set up a clinic and I practice my clinical work from here. I also practice clinical midwifery, holistic midwifery from here as well. We run workshops and lots of other educational initiatives. And as I mentioned to Saida before as well, we've just purchased 6 acres of land with which we want to, in North Wales, where we can take people away to for health retreats, and look at ways in which we can get back to permaculture and tending to the land, and being able to be people who fall in line with the sort of purpose of creation, which is number one, to cultivate the earth, you know, and there's no real cultivation of the earth without cultivation of the self. And second is to worship God. But again, to worship God, we've got to know God. And we can only know God when we know ourselves. And the third is to be stewards of the earth. You know, so to have that custodianship, so that every single thing, whether it's from the animal or the plant kingdom or the human race, is benefited from us rather than harmed by us. When we look at these 3 sort of prime reasons for why why God created us, we have to look at then, how are we in line with, you know, sort of fulfilling that purpose, or are we not? And that's why I think when we look at things like Untitled medicine, they give us the tools to be able to fulfill all 3 of those. Because at the core of Untitled is this unique element of being able to see yourself through the prism of elements. And not only just yourself, but to be able to see everything around you. So the entire cosmos and everything that's within it has these elemental energetics. And so when we begin to sort of develop this relationship between ourselves and sort of the community and the other and divine, you begin to sort of find that Untitled gives these tools in understanding the self, in understanding the other, and understanding the divine. And when we come to understand ourselves, Saeed, I think one of the beautiful things that you find is, you know, you get to know yourself on many different levels. For me, the holistic approach is unique. You know why? Because it looks at an individual from a biopsychosocial perspective, that the biology and the physical sort of parameters of a person are explored. Well, likewise, that psycho-emotional component is really important. And you and I are not separate to our environment, where there's a symbiotic relationship. There needs to be a synergy between the 2. So what you begin to then see is, as we develop these sort of connections between ourselves and the other and the environment, now we can live harmoniously. One of the things you mentioned just briefly before was that concept of physis. And that's the body's innate self-healing power, that when we give the body the tools it needs, it will heal itself. And that's what we need to be able to do through those 6 lifestyle factors that Untitled promotes. This is how we give the body tools to regenerate itself, to repair itself, to sort of grow itself such that it's not in a disease state. And so that's really kind of a little, I'm very passionate about this, as you can see, and sometimes you've got to stop me because I can go off on many different tangents, but that's my journey into this. And, you know, so for the last 20 years, I've been in the health setting, and I've been really kind of passionately, almost evangelically, really trying to get it out to as many people as we can. And I'm excited about the work that you're doing too, Saida, because I think as women, we bring a completely different energetics to this discussion, to this dialogue. You know, we're so familiar with having male practitioners out there that I think it's really high time that we bring back sort of a lot of females and a lot of women into this sphere of healing and natural medicine, because we bring something unique and something different. You know, and this is what I want to kind of see more and more of. So I want to thank you for giving me the platform, first of all, to come here and to really join your audience and share what it is that I do.
Oh no, to be honest, it's my honor that I've been able to get yourself on here, because like I said, it's so important for us to, because like you said, we're all connected. Yeah. And as our Sheikh says, that we are product of this environment, and you know, you can't just work on yourself. You have to work with the community and society and humanity at large. So we live with the times in which we live in. it's amazing for us to be able to get this knowledge out there and to be able to share that. So you're doing a lot of teaching right now, aren't you, in terms of like you know, do like the sessions, the workshops that you're doing, which is so extremely important, because we do need that. I mean, although it's still not this, you know, to the extent that you've had to study, but it still gives people you know, some insight into that world through those workshops. It's like, for example, a few of the books that you mentioned, I've gone away and I've purchased that, you know, and I'm like looking through, you know, studying it and reading it, like that one,
She's brilliant, yeah.
The Thyroid Revolution. But you know, it gives you that insight for, so for you can, so because you can't just take it from that, you know, although the work, I'd love for my one-off session to have that magic effect, but we have to go away and make those, implement those changes and what have you. So like you're now doing like you're promoting your gut workshop. So we're hearing a lot about the gut and the role of the gut in our health, but what does that actually mean? Because initially when I used to think about the gut, I used to just think the stomach, but obviously it's much more than that, isn't it? So what is the gut?
So when we look at gut health is well, really from a sort of Untitled perspective, gut health is everything. Gut health is just health, you know, that actually when we look at approaching an individual, every disease that a person has, if we were to trace the sort of origins of that disease, we will find somewhere in the gut there was some sort of imbalance. And particularly now, you know, in light of the last sort of decade or so, when we're looking at how science has begun to look at the gut, you know, you can see over the last 2 decades, just the amount of advancements that there's been in science in looking at gut health. But long before that, when we look at somewhere between the 11th and 8th and 11th century, when you begin to see Untitled emerging, gut health was key in that time. So at the core of your well-being, gut health is important, which is why one of the reasons why Ibn Sina put dietetics as one of the main what we call lifestyle factors, that when you look at gut health, constipation is known as the mother of all diseases. Much of our psychological health, emotional health, our physical well-being actually begins in the gut. And so without real gut health, then we'll find that this is where we're going to find ourselves now heading down the road of lots of autoimmune conditions. Many of the lifestyle diseases that we see today are all as a result of imbalanced gut health. So it's a huge, huge topic, which is why I couldn't do it justice in just an hour of a workshop. It needed a workshop in and of itself. And so, you know, if I'm able to screen share just quickly, if that's okay, I'll just bring up something just to be able to show you that, you know, when we begin to look, I'll just bring this up as a chart so you can see. So, you know, here we've said as well that all diseases begin in the gut, and, you know, quite, you know, I love this little sort of quirky saying. It says the path to health is lined with good intestines. And it's so true, because gut health begins all the way from the mouth, all the way down to the anus, you know, and every single component of that digestive health is extremely important. That, you know, as food enters our mouth, as drink enters our mouth, what occurs in our mouth is extremely important before it lands in the stomach, before it lands in the small intestine, before it lands in the large intestine and then makes its way out. That quite literally, you know, we would regard the gut as being the epicenter of not just your physical health, but your mental health too. And if we are to have sort of better immunity, or we're to have, you know, sort of better mental clarity or just well-being in our lives, then this is the area that we really need to tinker with. That actually, it's not even you are what you eat, you are what you digest. That you and I can have the best of foods on our plate, but if that system is not working optimally, then we're not going to really take benefit from a lot of this. So actually rebuilding the gut now becomes really important. And there are many ways to be able to do this. You will always hear me harper on about agency and autonomy. Agency and autonomy are so important. I don't want anyone here to feel as though that, you know, bringing well-being and bringing balance into their life is beyond them. that every single one of us has that capacity to acquire a small amount of knowledge, even the smallest of changes. And this is what I always say to my clients when I'm working with them. It's those micro shifts that create the macro effects, impacts in our life. That's something as simple as not drinking water with your meals, that we sip the water rather than gulping it, that we drink warm rather than ice cold water. Each one of those small little things creates enormous impact on our health and well-being. And these are the things that we've got to really look at. I know I mentioned sort of the 6 lifestyle factors a couple of times, but if I could just take a couple of minutes, Saida, with your permission, just to introduce them properly here, that, you know, Untitled looks, I think for me, it's one of the few medicines that really looks at preventative health in a really serious manner, you know, and preventative health is extremely important, you know, it's better than the cure itself. But a lot of these can also be used as tools for treatment to bring somebody back into balance too. That when we look at the 6 lifestyle factors, Ibn Sina said there are 6 key areas that if we give attention to and look at, then my goodness, these are what are going to bring or maintain health and well-being. There are 3 states we can be in. We can be in a state of health, we can be in a state of neutral, or we can be in a state of disease. That health is where we've got the absence of any kind of disease. Neutral is when we've moved away from health, and disease is when the body is now plagued with some sort of condition. And when you look at these 6 factors, one of the wonderful things is it's examining the relationship between yourself and the environment. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at ways in which you can monitor the quality of your life through environment, air, and breathing. That when we consider the air, okay, and how we're breathing, that those are really, really important. Every year, over 4 to 5 million people die just from air pollution alone. And actually, one of the first sort of what we call interventions that we would place in somebody with depression would be, are they breathing optimally? So he places this as his number 1, what we call factor. From their sleep and wakefulness, the right amount of sleep and undisturbed sleep is extremely important. And actually today, when we look at the works of Natasha Gominak, and we look at the works of Matthew Walker, one of the things you begin to see that actually without sleep, we don't have health. So we can eat the best of foods, we can, you know, make sure our digestion is optimal, but actually without sleep, we don't have much. And I'm just tinkering with the 4th workshop at the moment. I've gone back and changed a lot of things. And it's kind of shifted me into that thing of, my God, if we're not sleeping well, and if our waking hours are not good, then again, this causes huge problems. The next thing is food and drink. So this lifestyle factor is what we look at in the gut workshop, that, you know, everything we eat either sustains us, brings us balance, or actually brings disease to us. And with that is coined hydration. And then you see the importance of movement and rest, that if the body is not moving as it should do or resting in the manner that it needs to, this is when it becomes really problematic. And with the gut workshop, we've coined actually elimination here as well, that a lot of people don't realize that it's very important for us to retain nutrients in the way we need to, but likewise, we need to eliminate from the body toxins and harmful things so that the body doesn't become diseased in that manner. And just as importantly, the 6th lifestyle factor is what we call emotions and psychological factors, that every emotion also has an energetic sort of what we call classification. And so when we're looking at certain emotions, if you've lost a loved one and you're going through a form of bereavement, or you're going through a particular trauma, that actually the energetics of that, if it's grief, then you've got a lot of earthly, what we call cold and dry coming into the body. That if we engage with that for a whole year, then we begin to see the impact of that on our physical body, as well as seeing it in our psycho-emotional health. So, you know, each of these areas is always going to be doing one of 4 things. It's either going to be increasing the heat, or decreasing the heat. It's like, so in which case we'll be seeing heat or coldness in the body, or we'll be seeing dryness or moisture. And, you know, for those who came to that first workshop, we talk about these 4: hot, cold, wet, and dry, as being very, very important to health and well-being in United medicine. That this is how we measure how well our bodies and our healths are doing in relation to that. And I think it's, you know, I'm always like completely profoundly overwhelmed by just how much attention, you know, he gave as a you know, as a physician to each of these areas. Each of these areas are now kind of taken by individuals, and you begin to see just how important they are. So imagine now Ibn Sina has looked at all of these areas, and this forms his preventative health sort of measure. And there's this branch of this medicine that really looks at how each individual can take responsibility in these areas. And that's what my 4 workshops are about. That what I've done is I've basically taken the 6 lifestyle factors and I've coupled them together. The first workshop looks at, as you know, the human frameworks, looks at the 4 elements, the 4 temperaments, the 4 humors, and then we say, right, let's take each of these lifestyle factors, we couple them up, we do food and drink, elimination and retention, we look at air environment, psychological and emotional states, sleep and wakefulness, and physical activity and rest. That actually, if we do this, Saida, we become the kings and queens of our well-being. Literally.
Inshallah. So the gut workshop, is it the first 2 that we're going
to? Yes, it's the first 2 that you'll see there, that begins to look at everything that deals with, you know, from how the actual digestive system works. So we go through everything from the mouth to looking at the stomach, to looking at the small intestine, to the large intestine. And we look at each one of those things and begin to see when something goes wrong in each of these places, what kind of things are we likely to see. So if you've got a problem with particular symptoms and whatnot, could it be a small intestine problem? So, you know, you'll hear people talk about things like leaky gut quite often, you know. So when you look at leaky gut, we're looking at the small intestine here. So we're looking at the integrity of that part of the digestive system and seeing, okay, why has now there been this sort of gut permeability beginning to occur? So we go through all of that. We take a meal, and we show you, as you're eating that meal, what begins to happen in digestion. Where are the nutrients extracted? Where does the waste go to? What happens to hydration? So you see this sort of journey take place from beginning to end. We look at the role of the nervous system in the digestive system as well, and how, you know, with digestion, you need to switch on the nervous system first, because that's the first, you know, that's the beginning of digestion, is, you know, whether or not your nervous system is switched into what we call a rest and digest, a parasympathetic state. Because if it's not, and you're on the go and you're running, then you're not going to really be able to digest your food. So, you know, we go through tongue analysis on this, because the tongue is like a sort of a reflex zone, almost like the foot is, the ear is, the eye is. That when we look at the tongue can tell us an incredible amount of information. Emotional health also can be seen, and often when my clients come and I go through certain things with them, they're oftentimes quite surprised by, whoa, how did she figure that out? So we go through tools of tongue analysis. We go through the energetics of food, hot, cold, wet, and dry. We look at what should a plate look like when we're eating, what kind of temperament should eat what kind of foods, what do hot foods do in the body, what do cold foods do in the body, what do dry foods do. So, you know, the whole gut is kind of looked at. We look at the macronutrients, which I think a lot of people don't give enough consideration to. We look at superfoods. So the importance of things like fermented foods, vegetable juicing. We look at fats. We look at a number of different superfoods. And then we begin to look at as well, when we take certain foods out, what kind of foods do we replace them with, and how best do they help the body. So whilst it's not going to give you specifics of take 5 cups of this and 1 cup of this and do this, it's going to look at the general principles that surround gut health, so people can use those tools for themselves and for their families as well.
Because we're hearing a lot about also the microbiome as well, aren't we? So what is the microbiome? Because I'm coming across it quite a lot in the material that I'm studying. And, you know, how does that actually, what role does that actually play?
So microbiome is, it's basically the ecosystem. It's the, what's interesting actually, as you mentioned the word microbiome there, I was reading the other day how, there are 10 times more what we call bacterial cells or non-human cells on the body than there are human. So when we look at the microbiome forms what we call that sort of community or ecosystem within our bodies that help sort of us break down our foods, break down, I suppose, aid in digestion so that, we're able to get the best out of what we, sort of eat and drink. When we look at the microbiome, you see so much of that gut health, without that microbiome where you see sort of, they live in different parts. You've got microbiome that's in your mouth, in your stomach, in your, small intestines, large intestines, that over 500 to 700 different types of species live there. And when these species now begin to sort of, strains begin to become imbalanced, or they're kind of unfortunately gotten rid of because of disease or the foods that we're eating, then what you begin to see is ill health beginning to occur in the body. That actually so much of the gut bacteria is responsible for producing what we would call neurochemicals in the body. And this is what regulates sort of, I suppose, lots of the physiological processes. One of the interesting things is 90% of serotonin receptors are found in the gut. So that serotonin, the happy chemical, is found there. Now, if you're taking antibiotics or you've got some sort of inflammatory gut disease, can you begin to see how that's going to massively impact your overall emotional health and well-being? That if these gut microbiomes are also responsible for ensuring that inflammation is reduced in the body, they're going to have an impact on your immunity, they're going to have an impact on digestion, your mental and physical well-being. And so many, they're saying actually there's studies coming out now, and when they begin to look at the diseases that people are having, it's because there's an absence of certain strains of gut bacteria that are there. And without them, we can really sort of get ourselves into trouble, which is why on the gut workshop, we spend a little bit of time going over this and look at what kind of foods we'll put back, things like sauerkraut. So I'll go through teaching how to make sauerkraut and how something as simple as sauerkraut can repopulate the gut. There was an interesting study actually done not too long ago on mice, Saida, and what they did was they gave these mice that were otherwise healthy and quite skinny, if I can use that word. I don't like to use the word. They were skinny, slim mice. And they gave them, I think that it was artificial sweetener. And within a short space of time, they put on a lot of weight, so they became quite obese. Now, they wanted to look at the factors that contributed to this. Was it because there was a change in the gut microbiome, or was it because of some other factor, So what they then did was they took healthy mice, and those healthy sort of slim mice that weren't obese, they took the feces of these mice and did a fecal transplant into the obese mice. So obviously we know that's where the gut, sort of bacteria and whatnot's going to be. When they transplanted that sort of feces into the other mice, those mice became well again. So you can begin to see that, in this case, obesity here under certain conditions, and you can read about this study, that as soon as the gut health changed, this is when you began to see now that obesity came in. And actually, when you look at things like your metabolism, there are each, you've got to look at microbiome as each of these strains of bacteria have a specific function. And when we look at the specific functions of these gut microbiome, we've got to say, oh, let's not blanketly just take a whole load of them. But what is it we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to fight inflammation in the body? Are we trying to improve digestion? Are we trying to improve metabolism? In which case, then we will take specific sort of microbiome or probiotics to be able to counter each of those. you know, our microbiome is pretty much given to us by our mothers during birth. So as we go through the vaginal sort of canal, the sort of vaginal canal has these seedings of these gut bacteria. They then go all over the baby's face, mouth, and then over the course of the first 1,000 or so days, which is roughly about sort of 3 years or so, the person's bacterial microbiome is developed. And there's a natural sort of symbiotic relationship between us and our microbiome. There's a healthy sort of balance that occurs between the two. When we take antibiotics or we don't eat whole foods, a lot of our foods are processed. This is when we begin to really see an imbalance beginning to come in. And when that imbalance comes in, now we've created a state for dis-ease, and disease is now sort of, it's rife because we've you know, kind of disrupted this natural sort of what we call ecosystem that is supposed to be there to help us. So it's really important for young children, you know, if someone's had a cesarean section, even then through the skin there are still strains that can go there. You'll see sometimes they'll place a piece of gauze inside you know, the baby's inside the mother's vagina after birth, and we'll see the baby with that as well. But gut health is really important in those first few years, you know, and it's really important to make sure that what you feed your baby, breastfeeding is extremely important here. And you see like colostrum, those first few sort of like drops of milk in the first few days after the baby's born is really important. It's got what we call a purgative effect. And you'll see the baby after a couple of drops of this will begin to empty out the bowels. And then this now allows for food to go into the baby's digestive system, for that colonization of those bacteria to take place. And when they do, now this is where the baby develops, you know, sort of its immunity and its health and well-being from there. So from there on, everything it comes in contact with, the food that it eats from mum, the breast milk, all of those things are going to be building your baby's health and well-being. And skin conditions, things like eczema, psoriasis, all of those things are a result of the imbalance in the gut microbiome. And it's easy, you know, this is where you also begin to see as well that when somebody has leaky gut, for example, where you know, the gut permeability, for example, those cells that should be tightly linked like this in the gut, unfortunately begin to sort of not have the integrity as much, so they separate out, and there's gapping between them. When you're having processed foods, undigested or those preservatives and whatnot will feed through into the bloodstream, and because these are not particles the body knows or recognizes, now the body will throw off an immune response, and then, you know, this is when you begin to see sort of inflammation is the body's way of beginning to counter anything that it feels it's being attacked by. And so this is where you begin to see leaky gut becoming a problem. That actually, even when you look at the tongue, if you've got quite a scalloped tongue or there's a lot of irregularities to the edging of the tongue, we'd want to look at the small intestine, because 80% of our digestion takes place there. And if there's something going wrong here, we're not absorbing nutrients, and you know, we're not taking benefit from our food, we want to look at, well, how do we improve this? And these are all the things that we talk about, Saeeda. Obviously we don't have time here to go through things like that, but those are the kind of stuff that we would look at and go through, so people understand, so that's the function of the stomach, that's the function of the duodenum, or now I see actually chewing is extremely important. That most people will literally put food into their mouth, 1, 2, 3 chews, and then boom. And actually, when you look at, you know, how many teeth we have, there's 32, and we should chew somewhere between 15 and 32 times. Obviously, with something like soup, you can't, but we should chew really well, because masticating is such an important part, that when you look at the saliva and the enzymes there, that chewing and chewing really well switches on our, you know, sort of senses in terms of taste, smell, touch, and our stomach now begins to, you know, get the hydrochloric acid to the level it needs to in order for the next part of digestion to take place in the stomach. Honestly, it's such a sophisticated system, and I think once we get to grips with what's what, we can really work wonders with that. Something as simple as even drinking ginger water, for somebody who's got lots of bloating and gas, just something as simple as that, and not drinking between meals, you'll see how many digestive ailments will literally just poof, go away as a result of that. Or not knowing how, when you've had something that's quite fatty, that actually, let me have a glass of mint tea afterwards, because that mint tea is going to help what? It's supposedly good for what we call releasing bile from the gallbladder. So that breaks down, and those small, fatty acids that we're looking at become really important for our health and well-being. So gut microbiome is crucial. Like we said, we're more microbiome than we are human beings. There's 10 times as many human cells, more than human cells in the body.
So inshallah, we can learn more about that on the gut workshop, inshallah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, like you've just mentioned, like it's the small things. If we can make small changes, it can actually make such a massive impact in our health. Like, for example, just the chewing, when you said that we have 32 teeth, that's a sign that we should be chewing that much. And just becoming conscious of that, I was realizing that I wasn't properly chewing my food. So like now it's about becoming more conscious. So like now I'll be more conscious of slowing down, chewing my food more, and also not having the water, either having an hour before I have something to eat or having it an hour afterwards, and just seeing what difference that makes. Just by even just slowing down and eating your food, you taste it more. You're tasting it more, and you feel more fuller.
Yeah, it's so true. A lot of people don't understand the role of the nervous system, in particular that vagus nerve, when we're looking at digestion and the digestive health component, that the digestion really does begin in the nervous system. That if our bodies are in a state of fight and flight, if I'm running, sort of a workshop, or I'm in a busy shift at work, or I've got to go pick the kids up on the school run, or I've literally got 20 minutes between this meeting and that meeting, my body is not in a state of rest and digest. And if my body's not in a state of rest and digest, it's not ready to receive that food. So one of the, whilst I was writing the workshop, it took me 3 months to write it. I actually went through a series of what I call sort of small little tests that I did, where I would invite every Tuesday a group of people to come and eat in my house, and they would be guinea pigs. So for a whole week, I would get them to eat like this, and they would chew this many times for me, take this, do this, so that I could begin to see, well, what is it that creates? And it was from there that I began to look at the wisdoms of eating. That you don't always have to look for a pill, or you don't always have to go and try and put some sort of big kind of, whoa, I did this up to my gut and I took this and this. Something as simple as sitting down, bringing your attention to your body, utilizing breath. I always say to people, use breath to take yourself into the parasympathetic system. Sit and look at the food. Begin your meal with gratitude. Begin your name with the divine. Share your food with people. Eat slowly. And don't eat until you feel full. Eat until you feel as though, do you know what? I could eat some more, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to stop. And, get up. And something small like that, you'd be surprised as to how much of an impact it can make. I remember on one of the weeks I was doing something, I introduced gut probiotics into my diet. And in that week alone, just the difference of eating like this with addition of the probiotic, I lost 10 pounds. Wow. As soon as I took the probiotics away, and I took my diet back to a really sort of processed whatnot, because I wanted to just get my gut back to an imbalanced gut state, that even though I put those measures in place, I very quickly was able to put that weight back on. So it's looking at, I never say to people, take things out and deny yourself X, Y, and Z. What we've got to look at, don't have 5 slices of cake every day. Don't, guzzle down 5 cans of fizzy drinks. That if you're going to have a little sweet treat, let it be an occasional thing. That most of the time when we feel good, we eat good, we eat clean. And when we don't feel good, we feel like junk, we eat junk. So ask yourself, as I'm reaching for this carbohydrate or this sugar, what is it that I'm emotionally trying to push down or push away here? What's taking place within my body? I always say to people as well, it's interesting when you look at hydration in the form of water in the body. I always link hydration, you know, I find there's a correlation between that and self-worth and self-esteem, that a lot of people won't hydrate their bodies well. They don't feel themselves, you know, when we look at water, it's such a valuable commodity that when you place that into the body recognizes that. So many systems in the body are optimized as a result of adequate hydration. And actually, if we don't drink well, then so many systems don't work well, one being the gut. That when I get people to come to my workshop on the sessions with me, one of the first things I always discharge them with is drinking water adequately, and drinking water where they're sipping rather than gulping. Because if you and I were to take a watering can and we took a whole watering can and poured it over a plant, what you'd find is actually all the water would seep out the bottom. But if we came every so often and dropped in a little bit of water here and there, you'll find that all the water will be taken up by the plant, and as a result, the plant is benefited. So likewise, I say to people, split your glasses up into 4 if you're going to drink a litre, into 8 if you're going to drink 2. And over the course of an hour, sip this 250 mils. And as you're sipping it, say to yourself from your body that, you know what, I'm choosing self-worth and self-esteem here. And you know, when people do this, although it sounds a little bit like, that's a bit different, so many people come back and say to me, my God, just the difference that I feel in just hydrating myself adequately throughout the day, that actually my constipation is eliminated. I didn't even have to bring fiber in or XYZ in. Actually, I'm noticing a huge difference in my skin. I'm noticing a difference in my energy and vitality. I notice a big difference in just my mental awareness and my ability to do things. There's so much more clarity in my day. I feel so much better, and I actually do feel like, you know what, you're right, there is so much worth and inherent value to me. Something as simple as water can do that. We need to, everything we do, there needs to be that component of mindfulness, that as I do it, I'm doing it with consciousness. You know, and that's the biggest difference that each one of these things do, that I intend it, you know, I start by saying it in my head, I bring it into an embodied sense, and then as I partake in that action, I'm constantly reviewing and looking at what's occurring in the body. What am I noticing as I eat this now? What happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? And there's no joy than sitting down and eating together, right? I know when I sit down with my family, that's my absolute favorite time of the day. When I've prepared a meal and that meal has been something I know they're going to enjoy. When they sit down, the smiles on their faces, and you see them going, that's just so nice. The smell, the sight, the touch, the taste, my goodness, it fills the heart. So it definitely fills the stomach, but food is more than nourishment in a physical sense. There's a spiritual, there's an emotional connection there. And you know, as we hear our Prophet say, food for one is enough for two, food for two is enough for three, that when we share, we get so much back in return. That communal eating, slowing down, being mindful, chewing properly before we you know, get another mouthful together, all of those things really contribute to a really good, what we call, you know, gut health. You know, sorry, I've kind of rambled on again there. So
no, thank you for reminding us, because those techniques, those small things that you mentioned, they are from our prophetic and Islamic lifestyle anyway. You know, just like you mentioned about just being still and just that mindfulness. And you know, this is why we recite all those little du'as, you know, at the beginning of food, after food, you know, and drinking water. You know, it's what is it doing ultimately? It's bringing us into the present moments. It's making us more conscious, making us more mindful of what we're doing. So yeah, it's a great reminder for that. So you just, you know, you're mentioning about, you know, how we're in this health crisis now. You know, we are in a health crisis, you know, in our health and in terms of our well-being, you know, with such an increase in cancer and diabetes and heart disease on the rise, and some, you know, and some conditions where we're born with them. So for, you know, those kind of conditions where we think that there is absolutely, it's chronic, it's debilitating, there's no cure for it, especially with people born with certain conditions. You know, by working on our health, are we able to eliminate it, or is it just doom and gloom?
No, of course. I mean, when you look at sort of a lot of the different sort of digestive complaints that people have, you know, a chronic lifestyle disease that they've developed, like diabetes or whatever, high blood pressure, whatever it might be, you know, I'm always saying to people that food is like information for the body. You know, when we look at epigenetics today, that we can be born with a predisposition to a number of different things, different conditions, ill health, and whatnot, okay? But what we eat and our environment either switches on or switches off. So every time you and I are eating, or we're looking at ways those 6 lifestyle factors are brought in or brought out of balance, okay, then what we're doing is we're either up-regulating or down-regulating certain genes. So for disease to become prevalent and there, or for genes to be turned off so that we don't have those things. And I always say to people, never ever take yourself to the place of helplessness. Hope is an extremely important component here. In a study, actually, they looked at, they took dogs and placed them in a room where the room was split into 2. Mm-hmm. One part of the room had, you know, as you know, that sort of electric wiring placed in there, and the other half didn't. And what they did was they'd give zaps of this electric shock to the dog, and the dogs would move to the area of the room where there was no, obviously, wiring. Then what they did was once they established that the dog was able to do this, they then blocked off access to the part of the room that didn't have this electric sort of shock component. And what they did then is they shot the dog. Initially it tried to escape, but then it couldn't. And it got to a point where it no longer moved or did anything because it reached that point of helplessness. Then what they did was they took away the barrier that separated the room. And now the room was back to how it was in the first setting. And they continued to shock the dog. Now, because helplessness has set in, although there was an option there available for the dog to move into, do you know the dog never went there? And I always say to people, when people come to me, the first thing I want to do is I want to really imbue them with hope again. You know, Shawshank Redemption said it best. Hope is the best of things. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and a good thing never dies. We want to be people who are forever hopeful. Because when we are hopeful, there is always a way for us to come out of things. Even as Muslims, when we look at Surah Inshirah, when Allah says, and you know, oftentimes this verse in the Quran is translated as after difficulty comes ease. But actually, the word, those prepositions after and come don't exist. In the Arabic, it's inna ma'a, verily with difficulty is ease. That difficulty and ease are parallel. It's our perspective that makes something easy, or our perspective that makes something hard. That doesn't mean now that when something difficult is going on, if I just think positively, it's going to be okay. But in an embodied sense, one of the first things that we do is we look at how am I impacted here? And then from the impact here, what is it that I can do? How can I empower myself rather than disempower myself? What is it that I can do to help myself in this situation? Whatever the situation might be, if we feel as though we have agency and autonomy, we are empowered beings. Absolutely. If we feel as though there's nothing I can do to help myself, then we feel disempowered. And that helplessness is something that, to me, is what is incurable. But most diseases, you can get yourself to a place where, yes, you may have a predisposition to a condition, or the autoimmune might be there, but your symptoms and the way you experience it are no longer there. So I had fibromyalgia, I had ME, and those are things that absolutely debilitated me to the point where I wasn't even able to walk. I was sleeping for 16, 17 hours of the day, to the point where now, subhanAllah, that is something that is far away from where I am. And how was I able to do this? Because I brought certain things back into balance. I bought certain vitamins. I bought a certain type of emotional well-being. And when you do, this is how, Saeeda, you're able to overcome these things. We've got to look at, you know, when we're in a situation, if I can bring about a new way of looking at it, then I will find ease in that situation. But if I continue to look at this as, woe is me, look what's happened to me, it's taken away from me, then I won't find any of that. I won't find that ease. I'll just find nothing but difficulty. And this is what's difficult, that in the world of psychotherapy, the term John Wellwood uses is called negative negativity. That when we're going through something difficult and it's constricting on us, if we bring a negative mindset, it constricts us even further. And life is a series of contractions and expansions. That's what the breath represents here too. That when I'm going through something difficult, let me see what is the one thing I can focus on to try and help myself in this moment. And when I do, whoa, let me see how much expansion is there. Most of us really struggle with being expansive beings. We're really good at being constricting. We have so much tolerance for pain that actually some of us really enjoy that pain, yeah? That when joy comes or happiness comes, we can't emotionally hold them. So with any kind of disease, whatever it may be, I always say to people there are ways around this. I've assisted many people with the help of their GP and myself. They've been able to remedy their high blood pressure problems. They've been able to remedy constipation, able to remedy diabetes. So many chronic lifestyle diseases have been able to literally like this be able to combat and being brought back into balance when people begin to look at what's happening in their life. That there is nothing, we're not just kind of these 1D people. There's a multifaceted approach that is needed. Where are we living? How are we sleeping? How are we eating? How are we moving? All of those things come in and impact us. And I think if we don't look at each of these things, then we're not really doing ourselves justice. You know, there is nothing, you know, like Allah says, everything has a cure except for death, right? So, you know, whatever disease or illness is out there, there is a way to overcome that. And, you know, many of you perhaps here are familiar with Imam Ghazali in his book, The Alchemy of Happiness. I think it's page 252. One of the beautiful things that he says is, illnesses are means through which man arrives at the knowledge of God. Sicknesses, he says, are God's servants, and he gives them to his chosen friend. That even in a state of ill health, we've got to say to ourselves, wow, I've got the divine gaze upon me in this moment. So if that divine gaze is upon me, that I'm in this position, what good can I take from the illness? If I did not have fibromyalgia, my goodness, I would not have any of this. None of this would have been possible. So in that light, my fibromyalgia, my ME was a gift.
Absolutely.
My ill health was a gift, and I took so many beautiful things. I learned so much about myself. I was able to, it was one of the means through which I connected with myself. You know, when you look at pain, this pain is a motivator.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we didn't have pain, we wouldn't do anything. If I had a tooth abscess and there was no pain, I'd just be sitting on that day in, day out. But as soon as I have some pain here, the first thing I do is I connect to myself, right? I'm like, whoa, I've got a toothache. My tooth's killing me. Then what I do then is I connect to the other. I ring up the dentist. Oh, please, you got to see me this week. I can't last another 2 days. Then we're like, oh, please, God, let the dentist, you know, let him work his magic so that I can get rid of this tooth pain. Look at how many ways you and I connected as a result of that pain. I connected with myself first, the part of my body that was aching. I was able to connect to another and ask for help, and I was able to connect to the divine. And that's the beautiful thing about this, is that when we shift that perspective, my goodness, everything else shifts.
Absolutely. And it's like you said that, like sometimes when I'm working with my clients, it's sometimes when they've got to that rock bottom, when they've got to that lowest place and they can't go, they don't think that they can go any further, that's when they actually start seeking that help. That's when they truly start to develop and evolve and rise and transcend that. And, you know, going back to that mindset is so powerful. It can make all the difference. It is all the difference. You know, that hope, the way I look at it is faith. And faith can't just be it can't be in action. It has to be action. Faith at the highest level is action. And sometimes we look at the big goal and we think, I'll never be able to achieve that. But there's always, like I always say to my clients, don't look at the big goal. Don't look at the 100 steps that you need to take, you know, or the 1,000 steps you need to take to reach the mountain. All you need to know is, what's the first step that I can take, you know? And it's, once you've taken that first step, what does it do? It automatically boosts your confidence. It gives you that, you know, I can do this. And then you just need to know the next step. You don't need to know the 55th step or the 100th step or the 1,000th step. It's always just taking that first step. And, you know, inshallah, through this session, I'm hoping, inshallah, it'll empower the sisters to take that step, whether it be that second or third or fourth step, or it might be for you, it might be that first step of empowerment. So, where are we going with this? Where, you know, what can we do in terms of our gut health? So obviously, if our who is this session for? So for example, is it for beginners? Is it for somebody who's advanced that already has some prerequisite knowledge? So just a little bit brief information on what the workshop is, the gut work.
Yeah. So the workshop is really I designed it for everyone from the layman or the laywoman to people who are even practitioners who just want to kind of maybe refine their knowledge or revisit some of their knowledge that they already hold on this particular subject. One of the things that I do, you'll know from having come to the workshop, is I always do a small theoretical teaching component, and then I'll do a practical exercise to help us kind of understand that. It's always really important for me to give people practical tools. I really like being pragmatic, you know. I want people to walk away with an understanding, for them to get, so that's how this fits into here and this fits into there. The workshop is for anyone who's interested in sort of taking sort of ownership of their health and well-being, is taking ownership of their family sort of well-being also as well, and looking at, okay, we ate ourselves into this problem, we can eat ourselves out of this. That when we understand that health really begins in the gut, then I always say to people, have you got the guts to be healthy then? Literally, it's like a play on word. So the gut workshop is aimed for anyone, any person off the street, because all of the terminologies that I use are broken down into simple terms. And everything that I do, even from the Human Frameworks workshop that you came on, that these can be quite difficult concepts to really understand and take away from. But I teach it in such a way that a person who doesn't have any knowledge, who's literally coming off the street, can walk away with information that will really help them form the basis, and then they can go away and build on that. It comes with an 83-page A4 PDF booklet that has every single thing that we go through on the workshop on there as well, including the templates for the tongue analysis and templates for meal planning. All of that stuff is on there. All the recipes for the superfoods are also on that workshop as well. And as I was saying to you guys last time, this course is normally £100, but we've reduced it to £50 just purely because every bit of money that is generated from these workshops is going towards the 6-acre project in North Wales. So I'm not making any money from this at all. This has literally been halved, and everything that, you know, sort of comes in the form of registrants, all of that goes there. And every person who attends the workshop also gets a tree planted in honor of their contribution to this project too, because we want to plant 1,200 trees over in the 6 acres. And so as our gift and our gratitude to each person that attends and supports us in this project, we'll get a tree, you know, in the form of a Sadaqa Jariyah in our Tree for Life project. So, you know, I'm not really one for pushing my work, but I'm so excited about producing a sort of project that allows us on a communal level to get back to the basics of this knowledge, that on a communal level allows us to be able to go back to cultivating the earth, for us to be able to connect with the earth in a way that we haven't done before. You know, there's a microbiome that lives in the soil. There's a microbiome that lives in the ocean. Did you know the microbiome in the ocean produces more than 50% of the oxygen for that coming year? It's, you know, it's when we get to know about the environment and everything in the environment and how we are a microcosm of that macrocosm, that the universe and us, we're all, you know, look at the word even universe. Uni is one versus song. This one song, you know, that we're part of this makeup, we're part of this kind of creation. And that's what we want to do, is we want to make sure that our microsystems match the macro system. And if something is wrong in the macro system, likewise it's going to be wrong in here. And, you know, this is what I'm always saying: develop a healthy connection to yourself that allows you to get over your insecurities and your issues and allows you to move forward with the purpose. We got work to do, man. We've got work to do, and we've got to begin to be people who believe we can make a change. Honestly, change lies here in our hands. We've got the capacity to do this, and there is so much greatness and goodness out there in the world. We've just got to literally feel as though we can grab it with our two hands. So that's what I invite every single one of you ladies to do, is, you know, take ownership, take agency and autonomy of your health and well-being. Make use of beautiful people like Saida here, who can give you the tools to balance your psycho-emotional health, who can really put you on that trajectory to being optimal beings. Because when we do, imagine there's a big army of us rising like this, who are people who believe in ourselves, who are people who want good for society, want good for community. Can you imagine the change that would occur? And what would happen? Incredible things would happen. We would grow our own food, we would live off the land, we'd go back to being hippies again.
Inshallah.
Right?
I always say, and that's probably why, and those people that know me know that 3 years ago, I was a completely different person until I kind of came to this journey. And it was something that I came across that said, make your purpose much bigger than yourself. When you're bigger than yourself, then you're willing to step out, you're willing to get a bit uncomfortable, because it's not just about me. And like you said, you know, this workshop is not just, it's not benefiting you, you're not going to get anything out of it, but it's bigger than you. And because it's bigger than you, you're willing to go that extra mile, you're willing to get yourself a bit uncomfortable, you're willing to push yourself and put yourself out there. I mean, for people who know me, I'd never been on social media up until these last couple of years. It's because I made my purpose much bigger than myself. I knew that there was something that was important, that needed to, you know, that I really wanted people to benefit from. And therefore I came out of myself. I had to believe in myself, and, you know, believe in the purpose and the vision, and that we've all been created. I mean, you, Sister Hannah, you know, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you for a purpose, created me for a purpose, and every single sister on here has been created with a purpose. So if we can find what that purpose is, absolutely, it allows us to step out of our comfort zone and give back. You know, we've all got something to give, something unique about ourselves. And
when we heal ourselves, the impact we have on someone else who's going through something similar to us is so much more increased, isn't it, Saida? Like Carl Jung said, only wounded healers heal, but they can heal to the extent that they themselves have been healed. That when we do our own work, we can go out there and do the work that needs to be done in that sort of greater sense. And I think that's what's so important. My own journey of healing and health and the work I've gone through has led me to where I'm at. Likewise, Saeed, I can hear very clearly every time you're speaking that you've been on this journey, and, you know, and you continue on this journey. And as you are, you've found so much of yourself. And that even me now, when people meet me, they're like, oh my God, I've got to get to know you again. Yeah, because I'm a radically different woman. I say to my husband, you know, over the course of our sort of 22, 23-year marriage, he's had 4 different women, literally, because who I was when I first married him to 5 years later, to 5 years later, to 5 years later. It's like he's had, you know, and likewise, he's changed as well. And I think that's what's beautiful, that as people, we continue to grow and evolve. Maya Angelou's quote is one that always excites me. It says, you do the best you can, and when you know better, you do better. That you'll always give yourself compassion, meet yourself with love, give yourself space. And every day when you go to bed, you say to yourself, you know what, you did the best you could. And that's it. And then the next morning you wake up, and today I've learned something new. Today I'm going to do better than I did yesterday. In that way, you don't sabotage yourself, you don't break yourself down. But each day and each moment, you're increasing, and with that increase comes an increase in the labor and the fruits that you do. That's the best way to be.
Absolutely. I mean, like, we're always evolving. I mean, like me as a parent, if I look back at to how I was a parent 18 years ago to the parent that I am now, there's no comparison.
Likewise, yeah.
I had to go through that journey. I was being the very best parent 18 years ago, and I'm a better parent now. I look back and feel guilty, and look at, you know, how I have damaged my children. I was doing my very best, and as I learned, I, you know, changed the habits, and changed the old habits and picked up new and better habits. And that's all we're on. That's all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can ask, you know, that asks for us. That, are we changing? Are we evolving? Are we growing? You know, whether that's spiritually, emotionally, mentally, are we growing? I just want to give the opportunity to anyone if they want to just jump on, if they've got any questions, they can ask Hannah. Just unmute yourself, and it would be nice to hear somebody else. It's coming on. Sister Sharia.
Assalamualaikum. Yeah, I've sent a little note earlier. It was about I've been off work for like 5 months. Obviously that's affected me mentally as well and physically because of my I've had an MRI and they found that I've got bulging disc. I've been doing a lot of driving to Leicester, from Oldham to Leicester, quite a lot, and that stopped around March time, and then the COVID came in and all the fear and everything, anxiety. Saeed and Noreen would know everything about me because they're the two people that I consult a lot. But yeah, I was just thinking about this bulging disc. I've been recommended spinal surgery. So I had my report on Friday, and one of the recommendations, because the physio is not, I'm getting a lot of information. I know I've got some gut problems and things like that, and emotional stuff going on. But is that something I'm just, I really, really don't want to take the surgery route, but I am going to ask for a referral so that I can hear from them what they think. But I don't want to, and my physio have said you don't want to waste the time. But I'm like thinking, well, let me see what they're exactly saying. What the risk factor is, and there is a list of risk factors if they do the surgery. And I was like, I don't want to go there, but I'm just going to go for the referral just to get some, get them to see me or whatever, or to give me some information. I don't know. But my question is there a, can you do something about these bulging disc? And, it's on my neck and it's on my lower back.
It's difficult. I'm one of the things I always say, without seeing the individual and knowing the full case history, it's very difficult to be able to give an answer that is comprehensive or will, because there's so many different things to consider here. But certainly one of the things I would say to you is when you're looking at things like this, particularly with back issues, always look at working with people who, for example, not only working with just your regular physiotherapist, but we're looking at people who are craniosteopaths and chiropractors, that they're also very, very important, sort of what we call body workers that can be rolfing is another thing that you could look at as well. And without really knowing your sort of issue too much, looking at diets that are anti-inflammatory, looking at ways in which you can use foods to sort of support what we call, like natural painkillers within the body. Also looking at as well, like your mental health in the course of all of this too. How can you regulate your nervous system through what we call the vagus nerve? How are you able to be in the body? How can you manage a lot of this sort of symptoms and issues that you're going through? There's a number of different areas that you'd want to look at and consider when we're looking at the back. You want to maybe look at the psycho-emotional factors, but in terms of physical, I mean, it sounds like yours is quite progressed and therefore you're needing to go for surgery. But even when you are preparing for surgery, that you make sure you take the steps required and are necessary to make sure you don't have what we call trauma post surgery, and that you do know how to be able to see to this. Someone called Dr. Joe Dispenza, who wrote a book called You Are the Placebo. You should read his story actually of how he came to develop sort of the science that he did. And one of the wonderful things we have today is, the sort of this word called neuroplasticity, which is our body's ability to be able to reconfigure those neural sort of connections that we have. He had a spinal injury, didn't he? That was quite severe, and through literally the work that he did, he was able to completely heal his back. In fact, they were going to insert these metal rods in. It's worth going on YouTube and typing in his story and reading what it was that he was able to do. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work for you, Sharia, but it's good to take a number of different routes to be able to get yourself the best possible sort of outcome that you need.
Yeah, I've been to an osteopath, and that has been good. I've been to Cairo for a whole year. So Yeah, I've had a car accident. Yeah, so
Okay, yeah. So it's worth looking at the stuff. Then in that case,
yeah.
what you're going to do then is, in conjunction with the surgery, if it's a, you know, it's a physical sort of a manual issue that you have, then you need to look at what can I do to support myself, because sometimes these manual therapies are needed and surgery is unavoidable. So you want to look at now, if this is a resultant of an injury, then how can I best help myself so my system, nervous system, you know, throughout this illness is as best as it can be, and that I don't struggle and I don't fall into depression, and I don't, you know, take loads of medications that bring about lots of other issues and whatnot in the body. Just looking at it from a wider perspective as you possibly can, Sharia, and ask yourself all the time, what can I do to help myself in this moment right now? What's the little that I can do? Even something as simple as breathing can impact the body. So you can see how that might help.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries, anytime.
Dr. Joe Dispenza, there's a few of his sisters that
Yeah.
went to his workshop a couple of years ago.
All right, I was supposed to go this year to the one in Dubai, and then with everything that happened, I didn't get a chance. So I'm hoping his book, though, You Are the Placebo, that's probably one of the most phenomenal books I've read in a long time, and I utilize a lot of his work. Yeah. I actually incorporated a lot of his work into the hypnobirthing program that I developed at the hospital. Mm.
I've got a few of his books as well, and a few of his meditations.
Yeah, they're really good.
I love his work.
And one of the brilliant things in some of the studies he did, you know, just 2 to 3 days of meditation actually completely changed the IgA levels in people, which is extraordinary, right? When you look at that I was like, that's unreal. That's something as simple as.
That's my number one like prescription, shall I say, that I give to my clients is meditation. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think, come on, my problem is this, and you're giving me this really simple, like I'm close my eyes and focus on my breath. Yeah. But it's phenomenal, you know, the research behind it, the science behind it is just amazing. You know, like I could not be still mentally, physically, emotionally for a few minutes. Like I literally, when I started meditating, I'd have to actually put the timer on for 3 minutes, and even then after a minute I'd have to check, because I didn't know what it was like just to be still and just to be present in my body. Through his meditations, alhamdulillah, it's about training the nafs, really training the ego, that I can go into a meditation and I'd have to force myself out after 40 minutes, 50 minutes. I'm happy to be in my bubble, to be in my meditation bubble, because the amount of peace that it brings, and the impact that has on your physical body, your mental, emotional well-being, how it actually, like you said, the neuroplasticity, how it fires and wires the connection of the brain, how we are addicted to a negative thinking and our negative feeling, and how it can, you know, significantly change that by learning how to just be still and to focus on gratitude. You know how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that if you show gratitude, I will increase for you. And there's so much research on that, and I don't know if you've come across the Heart Math Institute.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And even when you look at the work of the Heart Math Institute is incredible. When you look at the work of a brain surgeon called Rahul Jandial, in his book, he has what's called these little, at the end of each chapter, what he calls neurogyms. And gratitude is something that he also notes, that actually when we look at the brain and it's split up into the sort of the neocortex, the front, then you've got the midbrain and then the brain stem, that actually the midbrain, the limbic system in gratitude journaling actually connects and strengthens the forebrain connection. And as you just mentioned, Hebb's law, there, neurons that fire together, wire together, that when we begin to continually be in this state of gratitude, gratitude brings us into the present moment. It makes us realize that actually in this moment, as I'm here right now, what I have is more than enough. Because that's what most of us suffer with, right? This lack of abundance, this scarcity mindset that we've developed. And when you begin to see how you can shift this in the nervous system, this is where the magic now begins to happen. And for me, I've maintained a gratitude journal for almost 8 years now without ever missing a day. For me, the biggest changes in my life came from gratitude journaling and from being able to do affirmations, that along with the nutrition, along with the food, along with the lifestyle changes, that those two things have been, I call them emotional hygiene. that just as I wouldn't go out the day without brushing my teeth, I would never begin my day without doing my affirmations or my gratitude journaling. If you come to my house, every wall practically in a house has been filled with, even my clinic space here has been filled with some sort of, you know, affirmation. Because, you know, another interesting thing, if I can give someone a quick tidbit, you know, when you look at the phone, on an average, on a study that was done with 30,000 people, they looked at and saw actually that we unlock that home screen somewhere between 120 to 150 times a day. That's an average person. So imagine now if your home screen, that lock screen, now had something that was a positive affirmation on there, that are anywhere between 120 and 150 times a day, you unlock that and subliminally that message is getting to you. Can you imagine the impact that that creates? That when we look, as we mentioned, Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, that on a daily basis, we have over 60,000 thoughts per day. Of those thoughts, 90% of those thoughts, well, we will think every day. Only 10% of them are new thoughts. So every day we're recycling all thoughts. So you've got to consciously, there are more negative words that we can attune to rather than positive words. We want to attune to words that are what we call empowering. Words that allow us to feel in that situation, not bypass the difficulty or the pain, but acknowledge it and say, despite this, in spite of this, as I sense this and I hold this, what is it that I can do? I'm not into like, let's think positively and ignore the fact that you've just lost your mom or you're going through a divorce. No, let me hear what's going on, what's happening to you as you do this, and then what is it that you can do? How is it you can empower yourself? How is it you can go into an embodied state? What can you do in this moment? And that's what I want people to recognize, that even if somebody holds a gun now to my head, if I look at this and say to myself, wow, there's nothing I can do, but if I surrender in this moment to, look, this is what has been written for me, I can't escape this. In that moment, I've taken the power that person has over me as they hold that gun. That I've just said, hey, this is how I'm going to end, this is how I'm going to end. That person now has I've taken away from them the grip that they have over me, and the grip they had was the fear they can generate through holding that. Of course, I don't want to die, but if I feel as though now I'm in an extremely difficult situation, there's no way, and that I can change my mindset. In that moment, I can say, well, hey, you know what, you do what you want, I surrender. I surrender in this moment, and whatever will be, will be. What have you done? There's no power you hold over me now. It's those small little shifts and changes that we make that create big impact in the body.
Absolutely. I think surrender is extremely, extremely important. And I think had I not understood that surrender at a deeper level, I probably would not have been able to get through the loss of my mother, because it was difficult, because I was because of having that inner awareness, I was able to see when I wasn't surrendering, and there was that resistance and that fighting tooth and nail inside your head that no, I can't accept this. And then when it was surrender, there was a massive shift from, this is beyond my control, and ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will be done. And, you know, and the only power that I have is to surrender. And so surrender is extremely important. And, you know, just want to really end by thanking Hana. Like we could be on here, I'm sure, for another couple of hours.
But yeah, and it's been wonderful. I just want to thank you so much for just inviting me and allowing me to sit here with your guests and share a little of what I've learned. I hope it's been coherent and beneficial to you guys. And I appreciate even just the space that you're holding here to allow me to speak and giving me a platform to be able to share what I've, you know, like kind of learned. I think for me, what's really important is we have this term called zakat, right? That we don't give zakat just on the wealth we've accumulated, but there's also zakat on the knowledge that we accumulate. That we have to be able to, it's like learn, yeah, implement, and then teach. That when I've learned something, let me implement it in my life, let me do that thing, let me not just talk the talk, but let me walk the walk. When I've talked the talk, walk the walk, let me now go and see, hey, can I share this with you? Because it was a real benefit to me. And it's from that place we can create this lovely, what we call sharing, you know, kind of this ripple effect that it has on other people. And honestly, mashallah, thank you so much. I've just switched on to the comment section. You know, thank you so much to everyone who's messaged on here. Incredible. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And you're also very welcome. You know, Saeeda, that we've got to thank here for her generosity in sharing this platform with myself, and all of you as well for taking that time out. I know how precious time is, and so even for you guys to come here, and it really heartens me and makes me feel happy when I see people wanting to learn and improve themselves and their well-being. Everyone, Rana, Helen, Aifun, Nahid, Amina, you know, Sharia, thank you so much for coming, for listening, and you know, for also taking the time out to extend your gratitude as well. I'm really appreciative of that. You know, I feel really heartful right now.
Oh, thank you. Again, I'd like to just reiterate what Sister Hannah was saying. I'd like to thank all the sisters who've joined today, who've attended today, and you know, who are willing to commit to their self-development. Like Sister Hannah said, it's about all of us rising and transcending and becoming true conscious beings. And you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless and protect you all. Any benefit from these sessions is purely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes and shortcomings are my own, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives me. And you know, I hope that inshallah through this session it's been of benefit to you. And if you want to take your learning that extra, you want to learn more, you want to become more empowered, you want to make more conscious decisions both in your life and also help and support your families and your communities, please do either message myself or message Sister Hannah, and you know, take advantage of the fact that it's a 50% discount on the course, and also the fact that it's a win-win situation. Not only are you getting the course and learning and benefiting something for yourself and for your families, but also the fact that Sister Hannah is going to be they're going to be planting a tree in your name, so there's a form of sadaqah jariyah there, inshallah, that will benefit you both in this life and in the hereafter, inshallah. So I just want to give salam to everyone and ask you to keep us all in your du'as, and yes, I just want to end the session on that, and I'll just end with Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. In the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. All praises to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds, the most kind, the most merciful, Master of the Day of Judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those who earned your favor, not the path of those who earned your anger and went astray. Subhana rabbika